With Darva conducting an experiment that basically says whoever plays the nastiest usually wins more, many killer players are wondering how can they up their game. Sure, you could explicitly tunnel and camp, but often in those scenarios you could still take hefty losses. So how do you get better? What are the right choices, and when should you make them? Well, let's dig into that with our dear friend Ghostface today, but real quick, to celebrate the release of the new Scream movie, we are giving away 5 Ghostface DLC codes to the top voted comments down below. We'll be drawing those on January 31st, 2022. Good luck, everybody. Oi, 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 everyone. My name is Dylan, and welcome to the channel. Be sure you get your water today and unclench your jaw as we dive into my top 5 tips for playing harder and smarter as a killer in Dead by Daylight. Tip number 1, the flow of a match. It's first really important to understand the cadence and flow a match should have. While there are tactics like camping and tunneling, they have their time and place. Generally, the flow you want for a match is to get that first hook. Once you get your first hook, you will obviously want to find and chase the next target as soon as you can. The hope here is that you're now occupying 3 survivors. One that is on the hook, one being chased by you, and one who has to go unhook their teammate and heal them. If you could keep this ideal cadence going, only 1, maybe sometimes 2 survivors will be able to work on a generator at a time, buying you just a bit more time to get things done. This exact rule is why camping sometimes doesn't work. While you stand near a hook or chase the survivor who just unhooked your prey, 2 people have undoubtedly been sitting on gens. If you spend most of your match defending hooks, you're actually alleviating a lot of your pressure, not often building it. Unless, of course, survivors all swarm a hook, which is always to your benefit, but generally an outlier to the rule. Additionally, this is why tunneling is rough, but we will discuss that much later. Tip number 2, hook states. When playing the killer role in Dead by Daylight, it is important to understand that you're racing against a clock. Time is of the essence. Applying this to survivors, you often don't have time to hook each survivor sequentially. Taking time to hook each person once and then hook them all a second time will often result in you getting 5 or 6 hooks, but maybe no kills. To be more effective here, consider bouncing back and forth between 2 survivors. Hook the first one, hook the second. If you can, find that first survivor again and put them back on that hook, get them to their second stage. Now find the second person. Continue this back and forth, as I call it the ping pong method, until somebody is dead. There are variations of this where if you know that somebody is on death hook, has forfeit or canceled their decisive strike perk, either by generator work or healing, then you could go ahead and kill them off. In some cases, you simply cannot find your original target, so you may have to engage a third target to sling them onto their first hook before killing somebody off. But you should generally avoid hooking all 4 survivors in a row sequentially before killing somebody off, or you risk simply running out of time. Practically, this means that at the end of the match, you may have someone who has literally not been hooked all game because you spent time with everybody else, and that is what you're looking for. Tip number 3, slugging. With regards to the flow of a match, you have to consider other ways to slow the team down. A great example is slugging. Slugging is the act of downing a survivor, but not immediately picking them up. A great example of slugging is when you down one survivor and see another within a very short distance. While you could pick up and hook your prey, you could also leave them there for a second. Take a stab at your next target, maybe come back. Referring to our tip about hook states, if you just downed a survivor who has yet to feel the sting of a hook, and you spy a close target who has already been hooked before, it may be best to leave the unhooked target down. Often, their teammates will need to rescue them off the ground, buying you a bit of time to chase and down the victim that could go on their second or their final hook state. What you want to try and avoid is slugging someone without having additional targets around. If you leave a survivor down to go and find somebody, odds are that slug survivor is going to get picked up and healed before you can execute on hooking someone else. Which means you chase that survivor and spend all that time for nothing. So when you do slug, do so intentionally with a target in sight or nearby. Tip number 4, tunneling. Tunneling is the repetitious act of chasing the same survivor over and over again until they're dead. It's no secret that once a survivor is dead and out of the match, the 3-man team that remains is infinitely weaker for it, largely because of the cadence of a match. You get it. But in the midst of trying to create a 3-man team, many killer players waste colossal amounts of time and often still lose. Because of survivor perks like Decisive Strike, Borrow Time, and Dead Hard, you could chase the freshly unhooked survivor and fight through these barrier perks for another minute or even 2 before achieving any results, wasting humongous time in the process. If we consider that a solo generator takes 80 seconds to complete, you simply cannot afford another 2-minute chase. When it comes to tunneling, think smarter and consider the cadence of a match. Should you be wasting time chasing someone who has BT, DS, Dead Hard, while 3 other survivors crank out generators? A great way to handle these scenarios is to do as we mentioned above, and down the person who unhooked, slug them a moment, and then hit the survivor with Borrowed Time. Now, that person with Borrowed Time has to mend for 12 seconds due to their protection, and you have a survivor that you can hook. You've bought yourself at least a small moment of respite. If you suspect that a survivor has Decisive Strike, whether that is due to them being greedy, cocky, or just misplaced, it's absolutely okay to down them and slug them there while you chase somebody else. Refer back to our slugging tips for this. And this brings us to camping. Camping is a tough one to cover. When we examine the ping pong method we talked about and the cadence at which you should be hooking survivors, it doesn't always make sense to camp at the beginning of a match. In theory, it could work if you down a survivor before any generators are complete. See, a survivor has 2 minutes on a hook until they're dead, and it takes 80 seconds for a generator to be finished solo. You could do this and only lose 3 generators in the process. However, this is assuming that you get your first down before the first generator popped, which in many cases, it could be a rare occurrence. Realistically, there are smarter ways to quote-unquote camp. A good example is this. Seeing scratch marks that lead directly back to the hook is an easy way to get a good trade and build a lot of pressure, especially if the person being so heroic has already been hooked. Again, think about your hook states. However, do be careful about this, as if you're hovering the hook, this can interrupt your cadence, allowing 2 people to continue working on gens while the other 2 remain slightly tied up. You should only use the above method when somebody is getting greedy for the save before you've had the ability to vacate, or if you can down the unhooking survivor before they finish their task. This would create a scenario where one survivor is on hook and one is slugged, giving you an insane amount of pressure and power. This is a moment that you should take advantage of. In this scenario, picking up the slug would be a mistake, deflating all of your pressure, allowing the additional teammates to rescue their nearly dead friend off hook. So think this one through. If one down, one is on the hook, within feet of each other, this is surely a great scenario that you should absolutely take advantage of. Camping towards the end of the match with just 1 or 2 gens remaining, or chasing back to the hook towards the end of the match can also be a huge waste of time. This is more of a crapshoot, it really just depends on how survivors behave, but a good example is this. If someone is on the hook near a generator that has little or no progress, you may want to leave that area and go pressure the gen that likely has people on it. Once that survivor is unhooked and presumably healed, they'll likely start working on the generator that's closest to them, that has very little progress, while you run people off of the already progressed generator. This very much plays into the match cadence we talked about for tip number 1 and could potentially help win back an entire match, like how I won back this Ghostface match on RPD after losing 4 gens in 5 minutes. Additionally, and listen up survivors, camping after the exit gates are open is acceptable. Often leaving the hook to go find survivors leads to cheeky unhooks, 99 gates, etc. Survivors could still pull off a nice save even as you begin camping, but it's basically smarter to stick around instead of just giving them a free unhook. Here's a bonus tip. If survivors end up locking themselves into a 3-gen situation, and you can manage to hook somebody within that 3-gen area, I feel like you're typically in a power position, and you should try to hold that position, situationally of course. Survivors typically identify this as camping, and at its most basic form, it is. But if you could control generators and control hooks at the same time, why wouldn't you? So many of these tips come down to situational awareness and judgment calls depending on the behavior of the survivors and different scenarios that may arise, but hopefully this overview has given you a lot more to think about. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and check out all of our other killer tip videos. God knows we have plenty of them. And be sure to check us out on Twitch, where we are live 3 days a week. Of course, leave those comments down below for the Ghostface DLC giveaways, and I'll pray to the entity to see you guys in the next video.